Good afternoon, everyone. Today I'm chatting with David Gower from Emerita Resources. Folks, if you've been following this story, you know that it's soon, hopefully, coming to a close. Emerita has been fighting for the rights for the Aznalcóllar mining complex against a group who is currently going through accusations like embezzlement, fraud, and bribery. Well, the criminal court proceedings have just come to a close here over the last month. And now, as we wait for a verdict on the trials, we sit back and ask David what his thoughts on the trial were, when he thinks that we're going to see some sort of an outcome. And we also get an update on what's happening over at IBW. All right, everybody, enjoy the interview. David, it's great to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you, Steve.
So normally we start these interviews, we talk about the precious metals market and everything that's happening, but I'm not going to do any of that today because you guys are one of the hottest stocks in the Canadian junior markets, at least in terms of retail interest. You guys are always have one of the biggest followings on CEO.ca's message boards. I know every time my old buddy Doc Jones messages or tweets about you guys, there's this huge reaction to it. So you guys have a big following. So let's just get right into it. And specifically, what I'm talking about is the recent, I guess we could say, trials that's been going on in Spain involving the Aznalcóllar asset that have just wrapped up. There's obviously lots of stuff we can get into, but let's just start off with maybe you can give us what your official thoughts are on the trial as it's come to a close.
Sure, happy to. Yeah. So just for background, the trial it's after 10 years of basic police investigations and various charges and appeals, and this last stage of the trials, which ran from March 3rd to July 15th, uh, is essentially the sentencing phase. The prior ruling that led to this stage was by 5 Superior Court judges that declared there were no more grounds for appeal. There were no more evidence was allowed to be admitted. The crimes would be determined based on the facts before the courts, and so that basically led to this phase. And in Spain, uh, what's been explained to me by counsel and by unrelated counsel is you don't go to this stage of a trial there unless there's near certainty of conviction. So we were already feeling like we were in a very strong position at that point. Five the 5 Superior Court judges in a written resolution said crimes have been committed. These are the people that should be uh, tried for them, and this phase is more about who was responsible for what level of uh, responsibility and penalty therefore would accrue to them. Um, and so that's basically where we were. There were 14 people from the government related to the public tender process and the two principals of the other companies. So um, that's all been done. Then the next step for the judges, which it ended last week. I was in Spain last week when that happened. They will now convene and review all of the testimony that they've just heard. They would have already reviewed the more than 10,000, I think it's 14,000 pages of evidence and previous uh, appeals and documentation from those, et cetera, and before the trial. But I'm sure they'll cross-reference and go back to those things. The trial will end in a different way than we expect here. There won't be anybody standing up in court getting a "you're guilty and here's your sentence." Basically, the judges will produce a written resolution laying out all of the logic behind their decisions, how they are supported in law, etc. And these will go to the various councils, including ours. People that are guilty of a crime and have a sentence will be told how to deal with that. If it's a jail sentence, which We would be surprised if there aren't a few people at least that face jail in this process, and maybe some significant jail time, in fact. But they will be given a date to show up with their lawyer at the police station, to start their time. Others will be given a date by which to pay a fine if it's a fine. If you're sentenced to less than 2 years in jail in Spain, you don't have to serve it if you have no other offenses. So there will be potentially a community service type, uh, not really house arrest, but restricted mobility sort of period in lieu of that. We feel the court case went very, very well in terms of the crimes. Their crimes of corruption basically were prevarication, which is knowingly doing the wrong thing, knowingly not following the laws as a government employee, fraud, influence peddling, and there was one other which slips my mind right now, but all of these things had very strong evidence in the lead up to this trial, such that some of them were almost undeniable, and the the defense that was mounted almost acknowledged that because they did not work very hard at trying to make excuses for their clients with respect to the crimes that they were accused of. They seemed to take an approach to try to disparage Emerita as their attack on the charges. And of course, Emerita is not on trial here, so our counsel is basically saying, uh, that doesn't, whatever they want to say about us, it does not influence in any way the fact that the laws were broken and they have to defend that. So, long story, our counsel feels very comfortable that um, there will be some guilty verdicts coming out of this. Um, the importance of that is, of course, that in Spain, the law is very well established with respect to public tenders. If there's commission of a crime and awarding a public tender, that bid must be disqualified. And for us, that's really, really the prize. Excuse me. Because the administrative court, which is responsible then for administering the public tender in the lands, does not have a decision to make at that point. They basically have to follow the law also.
And to be clear, what's happening, the trial we're talking about now, this isn't the administrative court, correct?
No, this is the criminal trial.
Yeah. Okay.
So once there's a criminal offense, a conviction, then the administrative court, there's no interpretation available. The law just, they have to follow the law, and the law is if there's commission of a crime, that bid must be disqualified. So now the administrative court has already done their work and telegraphed that they agree with the criminal court. So once the previous five Superior Court judges declared no more grounds for appeal and no more evidence, the, the evidence was locked, so the administrative court could go through and do their work. A lower court won't rule ahead of the Superior Court, because if there's any chance of a contradiction, it opens up grounds for appeal, etc. So, but they don't have to spend another 2 years to do this. It should be fairly quickly. We went through this with the administrative court on IBW. People may not remember that, but for that process, once the administrative court ruled, they gave very specific instructions to the mineral department to rescind the resolution that awarded the previous public tender and issue a new one and award it to the next highest bidder. And they gave them 6 weeks to do that. So the process is pretty cut and dried once the decisions are done, based on our experience with IBW.
I have the accusations in front of me here. It was influence peddling, fraud, embezzlement, and
Embezzlement
prevarication.
was the one I was trying to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. The other interesting thing that's going on broadly in Spain right now is there's a wave of corruption charges, and investigations going on, and the key person is Vicente Fernandez, who is he was the highest level official in the Aznalcóllar case. He's been implicated in numerous, even larger corruption issues in other parts of government unrelated to us. So all of these things really support, I think, the fact that these people were led by not very good people and trying to disparage Emerita, who's been, working away in the region now since 2021 when we actually won the IBW case, probably have invested more than $60 million at this point. It's just not going to be a very well received defense at all, in our view.
Did Emerita have to make any statement during the criminal proceedings, or were you guys just watching from the sidelines?
No, we were actually the prosecutors at the complainants.
Okay.
So the trial begins with each lawyer making a statement, and then every one of the witnesses, which included the 16 people who are with the alleged crimes, are basically on a stand and cross-examined. Now, in their case, because we're not a federal prosecutor, they don't have to answer our questions. So they really had the ability to set up a narrative and have pat answers worked out with their lawyers, but it really didn't help them very much, I would say. There were a series of expert witnesses that the defense brought on, and we also brought some to counter those. But by and large, those expert witnesses, when cross-examined, uh, told the truth. They and they basically canceled about half of their so-called expert witnesses because that testimony, they're not going to perjure themselves, and the questions that we could ask them clarified the situation, and it didn't work out in favor of the defense every time. Our three guys, Joaquin Marino, our president, and our two guys that were involved at the time, were both put on the stand and did very well against cross-examination because they just had to tell the truth. So, and then the final stage of the trial is a closing statement from each of the attorneys, which would be about 14 in total with all of the people involved.
Did Grupo Mexico have to have any involvement in any of this, or were they just kind of like, we're going to finance this if it happens?
Grupo did have legal counsel there and did have the right to ask questions. But they weren't, and they did. They did do some cross-examination for their own purposes within the trial, but they weren't the most active part of the trial by any means. The defense lawyers, because they're not charged with anything. So
Now, did Vicente Fernandez Guerrero, did he take the stand, or did he?
he was the last one.
Okay.
He, of course, like all of the others, refused to take questions from our counsel. But his own testimony with his own counsel was just rambling. I would say he made ridiculous statements, such as one of the guys was on the stand with Joaquin. After Joaquin is his brother-in-law. They're not related at all. That we are a front for Boliden, and Boliden, because of the history of the Aznalcóllar project, was not permitted to be involved in the public tender. Just nonsensical accusations that had no basis or evidence to support them. So I'd say it was a fairly weak performance in his case, in his defense, especially because a number of the things that he was saying were clearly, and everyone in the room knew it, just outright not true.
Oof. So the obvious question I think that everybody who's watching this is wondering, and it gets speculated about on the boards all the time, is when do you think that we actually come to a resolution here?
Um, I don't think we'll see this resolution from the judges before August. And August to the month of August, basically, the courts are shut down. So I think it'll come in the fall. Uh, I'm going to guess October, maybe even into November. My understanding is this resolution will not be a small one. It'll be several hundred pages, likely, because of the scope and the complexity of the case and the number of people uh, that are involved. And what counsel is telling us, because of a trial like this with so much profile, they will be very diligent in making sure every point of law is checked and cross-checked, and so that it there won't be any sort of technicality that could be challenged. So that clearly would take a bit of time. But the lead judge here, is highly experienced. He's got a very strong record of dealing with corruption cases with very high-ranking officials. So he's never been intimidated in the past. I think he actually jailed the former president's brother at some point in his career for similar charges. Uh, so we're pretty confident that the judges that are hearing this case will not be swayed by anything other than seeing that justice is served. So
There's the criminal verdict, which we're obviously waiting for, could happen sometime after August, we assume. Now, then there's also the awarding of the rights to the Aznalcóllar complex. How does that work? Is there like do we assume that it then now has to go back to the administrative court and there's going to be the next ruling to wait on? Is that sort of the expectation?
yeah, so the administrative court has, I think, based on what's been communicated, has more or less done their ruling. They have written and they published that they have written their resolution. I'm sure they'll revisit it once the formal criminal resolution comes out, to make sure that there's no obvious contradictions that they can't support. I'm told that the lower court, the administrative court, will never uh, sort of challenge the ruling of a criminal court. It's just would not be heard of. Um, so what we saw with IBW is, once they ruled, and this shouldn't take months. It should take weeks to a month, maybe, that would happen. Um, they provided very, very specific instructions to, which come to us. They obviously go to the mines branch. I'm sure they would go to the current holders as well, that this resolution must be rescinded. Um, Almost write it for them, what has to be written, and you must reconsider the awarding of this public tender and award it to the next bidder. And in the IBW case, there were more bidders, so they actually had to go back and redo the assessment of all the bids. And we already knew from the way that they did the first assessment that we would be the second place bidder in that one. In this one, it's simpler because we're the only other bidder, so they don't really have that part of the process to do.
Okay, well, I think that I've got kind of what I'm going to get out of you in regards to the trial. So I appreciate you coming on here and giving us your thoughts on
Yeah.
that.
Well,
Um,
obviously, we don't want to second guess what the judges are going to do, but this is just trying to convey what has been very in-depth questioning on our part with our counsel and with unrelated counsel, and try to let people know where management's views are on this at this time.
so let me just sneak in a question too about everything else that's happening. Obviously, the company's not just the Aznalcóllar complex plan. There's more to it than that. We've got IBW. Any updates you can give us there that your shareholders may want to hear about?
Yeah, well, IBW would continue with 3 drills. We're still seeing very good mineralization at Alcura. And a 4th drill, we've moved off of Alcura over to the Infanta area because there are a number of targets there that have never been drilled. And that's the area where we're going to hopefully be putting the infrastructure for the development there. So we just need to do some condemnation drilling on those targets, or not. Have a discovery would be better, but at least we don't want to put a waste pile or a mill on top of an ore body and sterilize the ability to realize that value. So that's what's going on there. On the Ontario claims, they're doing the geophysics now to sort of target that, and similarly, those new Goslins that we found last year at Nueva Tintillo, they're doing the same crews will do the geophysics there and get that ready for drilling later in the year as well. So all that is good. On the permitting front, we were hoping the AAU would be published for public comment. It's going to be probably the end of the summer now, I think, or a little bit later. The mines department has come back with 4 questions that they want clarification on. So that's just holding it up while we prepare those answers for them. There's nothing really too onerous there, but it's just a bit time consuming. And then similarly for them, August is nobody's going to be at work. And we feel that is partly related to bureaucratic distraction with the whole Aznalcóllar trial. I mean, people that are their colleagues are obviously looking at serious consequences here, and they're not even sure who they're reporting to, maybe by the end of the year. So it's a bit understandable that they're dragging their feet a little bit while this is going on. So it won't hold up the overall process, I don't think, but kind of backs up what we were hoping to have done by now.
All right. Well, David, thanks so much for hopping on here. I know that this is one of the hottest stories that everybody wants to hear about, and our audience loves when you hop on here. So let's keep doing this in the coming months.
I appreciate the opportunity.
As we get more news. Thanks so much, David.
Okay. Take care.
All right, everybody. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this interview, do me a favor, smash that like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching.